Welcome back to Both Aunt Vivs. Kindred is FX's TV adaptation of Octavia E. Butler's 1979 book of the same name. Joining the growing list of Black shows like Watchmen and Lovecraft Country with only one season, it was announced less than 2 months after the series premiered that Kindred would not be renewed for a second season. The series starred Mallory Johnson as the main character, Dana, and Micah Stock as Kevin, her white boyfriend, and eventually owner, as they travel back in time to the slavery days. So what went wrong, and why isn't it coming back? Watching it, there were things that drew me into it because these are things that I'm just interested in general, like time travel, the Black experience, right? But it was so confusing. Just throughout, we all know, even in present day, like those power dynamics that our ancestors have probably had to go through. There's no time in the past that we're like, yeah, we just gonna go, right? Because we understand the freedoms we would be giving up by going back to the past. It was like the white boy understood more than she did, right? It was like, how, Sway? Like, how does he understand this more than you do? The series begins in the middle of the action. Our protagonist, Dana James, has just returned from a jump back in time with severe wounds on her back that look to have been inflicted by a whip. She's lying on the floor covered in blood and screaming the name, Kevin! Soon after, police show up due to noise complaints from her nosy neighbors. Quickly, she sends an email to her aunt telling her to please hurry. The show jumps back 2 days and we learn that it is 2016. Dana is an unemployed, aspiring TV soap opera writer who has just sold the Brooklyn brownstone she inherited from her grandmother and moved to Los Angeles. Her Aunt Denise and Uncle Alan are not pleased when she tells them what she's done. She meets a waiter named Kevin, who offers to drive her home after her phone dies. Later, they match on Tinder. That night, her first jump occurs. She finds herself in a room with a baby infant in a crib laying face down, suffocating. She turns him over, but then hears voices and follows their sound out to the hall. There she sees her mother, Olivia, who supposedly died when Dana was little. When she sees Dana, Olivia screams in disbelieving terror right before Dana returns to the present. Dana, startled, chalks her experience up to sleepwalking and a bad dream. The next morning, Dana's Aunt Denise comes over to see her new home. Denise's lack of excitement and critical tone sparks an argument, revealing more of the difficult family tensions between the two women. Dana reaches out to Kevin and they spend the day together purchasing items for her new home and later hooking up. That night, Dana time jumps again. This time, she saves a boy named Rufus from drowning. Rufus's parents, Margaret and Thomas Whalen, find Dana trying to revive their son on the banks of the river. Furious and certain Dana is the reason Rufus is hurt, Thomas threatens her. With his gun a few inches from her face, Dana is sent back to the present. She returns screaming, which alerts her neighbors. They stop by to check on things and leave unconvinced by Kevin that everything is fine. A frightened Dana tells an unnerved Kevin about her experience. On the next trip back in time, Kevin unwittingly goes with Dana because he was touching her when she jumped. The two pose as foreigners but are forced to play the uncomfortable parts of master and slave. They conclude that time moves differently between the two time periods. What might have only been an hour between the two jumps for Dana is years for the people on the plantation. Dana finds Olivia again, now older, and tries to convince Olivia to come home, but Olivia refuses. Hagar died of cancer, and Olivia now takes care of Hagar's daughter, Alice, whom she does not want to leave behind. During her trips back, Dana discovers that Rufus is her ancestor, which might be the reason she's always being pulled back to moments when he is in danger of dying. She surmises that she's being brought back to keep her ancestral line intact, believing that Rufus and a young slave girl named Carrie are meant to have a child together. Olivia discovers that in order for Dana to be sent back to the present, she has to believe that her life is in mortal danger. It is this feeling that triggers the jump back to her time. After returning to 2016, Kevin and Dana make a plan for the inevitable next jump. Kevin reveals to Dana that he does not want to go back. Dana, while hurt by Kevin's decision, understands. Dana's Uncle Alan comes to her house at her aunt's behest to collect her. They're worried about her. He brings her to the hospital where Denise works. And for a second, Dana lets her guard down and confesses to her aunt about what's been happening. Of course, Denise doesn't believe her and makes moves to involuntarily keep her in the mental ward. But Kevin shows up just in time to get Dana out of there. As they're leaving the hospital, they run into Denise talking to police officers in the hallway, which triggers a chase through the hospital. Kevin and Dana barricade themselves in a storage closet when suddenly Dana starts to feel a jump coming on. Instinctively, she holds onto Kevin's hand and they go back together. This time, Kevin and Dana return to playing the part of master and slave, with Kevin earning his keep at the Whalens' home by teaching Rufus piano. Dana resumes her mission to ensure Rufus and Carrie remain together and safe. Thomas Whalen is a mean and disgruntled man who often takes his anger out on his slaves, his wife, and his son. On a trip to town with Rufus and Kevin, Thomas allows Rufus to drink and gets him drunk before sending him back home. Kevin has a hard time keeping up pretenses of a 19th century slave owner, and his own moral code soon seeps through his interactions with Thomas, which leads to a fight between the two men. Thomas declares that if Kevin ever sets foot on his plantation again, he'll kill him. When Margaret's sister comes for a visit, she's shocked to learn that Thomas has gotten Rufus drunk and convinces Margaret to run away with her, throwing a wrench in Dana's mission to keep Rufus safe and with Carrie. Thomas returns to the plantation, already furious from his fight with Kevin, to learn that his wife and son are gone. His anger boils over and he makes Dana his slave. Kevin finds his way to Olivia's house and informs her of what's happened. Olivia rushes to the plantation but can't find Dana. Instead, she finds Sarah, who reveals her own years-long plot to harm the Whalens and refuses to help Olivia find Dana. Thomas is also looking for Dana and finds her reading in a slave cottage. He's furious. Slaves are not allowed to read. In an attempt to save herself, Dana offers to teach Thomas to read, which only infuriates him more. He drags her from the slave quarters and into a barn where he starts to whip her. Olivia runs towards Dana's screams and throws herself on top of her to block Thomas's whip right before Dana jumps. Dana comes back to the present, alone, laying on the floor of her house, bloodied and whipped, the same way we saw her in the beginning of the series. The police arrive again due to complaints from Dana's neighbors and ask to search her home. They become concerned when they see blood from her wounds seeping through her shirt. But Dana is rescued by Denise, who shows up and sends the police officers and neighbors away. Denise is of course shocked, but after witnessing Dana's disappearance from the closet at the hospital, she now believes Dana's story. When Dana tells her aunt that she thinks she's been sent back to save her ancestral line, Denise suggests checking the family Bible, which contains the names of their entire family tree. In it, they find Rufus's name, but instead of Carrie, they discover that Alice is the one Rufus is meant to have a child with. Kevin was left behind in the past, and because time moves differently, the next time we see him, years have passed. He's now older, grayer, and traveling on horseback with a grown-up Alice, Dana's ancestor. But Olivia is gone. The season ends on a cliffhanger, with Denise getting a call from the police officers in New York. Olivia, presumed dead since 1993, has been found. It's quite surprising that it's taken so long for Octavia E. Butler's novel to be adapted for the screen. Its themes and story have been ripe for a movie ever since it was first published in 1979. However, we're only now getting an adaptation, which leads to the main criticism of Kindred, the show. Why wasn't this made into a movie? The book itself is a short, dialogue-heavy read that could have lent itself well to a 90-minute movie script. Expanding the book to a TV series leads to unnecessary universe building that causes many episodes to drag. Unfortunately, instead of the cliffhanger at the end of season 1, acting as a technique to keep the audience wanting more and excited for the next season, it leaves the audience with a feeling of, wait, is that it? The characters themselves are feeling dread, shock, and fear, and yet those feelings don't translate to the viewer. Another issue with the show is the main character, Dana, who often comes across as wishy-washy and passive in the present, but then overly confident and bold while on a plantation in the 19th century. The backstory given to Dana, that she's an unemployed 26-year-old who just sold her family brownstone in Brooklyn, bought a house in LA, and now has dreams of becoming a soap opera writer, makes her seem naive and impulsive. Aside from the fact that no one just moves to LA and becomes a TV writer overnight, who sells their family brownstone without telling their family? What a waste of generational wealth for no real discernible reason. When her aunt and uncle react with incredulous anger to her decision, you can't help but side with them. It supposedly acts as a vehicle to explain why she's living in LA, but because it doesn't seem to have much consequence to the story as a whole, at least not in the first season, the information works against the character. The lack of emotional reasons for the decision makes it very hard to empathize with Dana. At her worst, she's unlikable and unappealing. At her best, she's dull. When we see Dana pretending to be a slave on her ancestors' plantation, she lacks an understanding of the danger she's in and refuses to play along with her scary scenario, making many questionable decisions. For example, when she confidently corrects the plantation's master and a white doctor in an early episode, she comes across as ignorant to not only the power dynamics of the situation, but also the danger she's in, which as a Black woman who's grown up in America comes across as illogical behavior. Overall, it's unfortunate that Kindred the series doesn't allure like the source material. Octavia E. Butler's work deserves the recognition of a larger audience, but this just wasn't it. What did you think of Kindred? Do you think it lived up to the book? Would you have preferred the story to be adapted into a movie? Do you find it hard to empathize with the main character? Were you looking forward to a second season? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.